Hello, everyone. You're watching CBC News Network. I'm Natasha Fatah. And today is a crucial final day of voting in the snap elections in France. The country is seeing its highest voter turnout in decades today, as the French watch closely for a major shift in their country's political landscape. Now, the elections could leave France with its first far-right government since the Second World War. The party swept a first-round victory last Sunday. However, it is expected to fall short of getting a complete majority. So then you're in a situation with a hung parliament, which could catapult the country into a political deadlock just weeks before the Paris Olympic Games. CBC's senior international correspondent Margaret Evans has been keeping a close eye on the elections for us. She's in Paris today. Margaret, what's at stake for French citizens and voters during this election?
Well, an awful lot, and of course, depending on which side of the political spectrum you're on. But the prospect of a far-right government in France is worrying for an awful lot of people. It's very psychologically difficult for many French people to comprehend, given the history of the Second World War here. But you've seen, of course, a week ago, a really big success from the National Rally, which is known as the RN here, a far-right party, and its leader, Marine Le Pen, and her deputy winning the first round in voting. So now what you see happening is different old political foes, if you like, from the left, from the center, trying to put together these strategic alliances to block that from happening, because it would mark a very profound shift in French politics, not just for the French, but of course for some of France's European Union partners, potentially for Ukraine, because Marine Le Pen is very pro-Russian. It doesn't mean that there would be a shift, of course, in the presidency, but Emmanuel Macron, who called these snap elections, also has a lot at stake. Many people say it was a gamble that he's lost, even before the vote results are in. He didn't have to call it. He did it because the far right made big gains in European parliamentary elections in France. He was hoping to put the choice to the people. That's what he's hoping for tonight. So there's an awful lot of at stake. If the far right does come into, win an outright majority in the parliament, his life will be a whole lot difficult. He would have to probably appoint a prime minister from the far right and then have years of difficult cohabitation. But even if that doesn't happen, it's a pretty splintered political spectrum that we're looking at now, and the notion of stalemate in a hung parliament.
Margaret, you've been out there speaking to people. How are they feeling as they're heading into this final round of voting? It's hard to describe the feeling. I mean, if I look at the square around me, there are all these signs kind of advertising the Olympics in 2 weeks' time. There are skateboarders behind me. But across the square, you can see a lot of the shops. I'm not sure if we can actually pan to see them. But they've put up, they're barricading the windows off. You've got plywood. A lot of the shops in the center of Paris are worrying about potential violence in this election. The Interior Ministry here says that more than 50 campaigners and candidates have actually been assaulted during the course of the election. That gives you a sense of how tense things are. There have been a lot of protests in this square by leftists who are really alarmed by the prospect of the far right taking power, and that police presence is expected to be huge across the country. 30,000 people tonight after the polls closed. We talked to a couple of people earlier today who were working to prevent, they were part of the tactical voting. They were working to prevent the National Rally from winning enough seats. For some people, that means they've not really been voting for people that they want to vote for, but instead they're voting for an outcome that they don't want to see, or voting against an outcome that they don't want to see. So it's pretty confusing for people, but one thing is clear for those who are engaging in that tactical voting: they think it would be a big mistake for France to elect a far-right government. Have a listen.
They managed to lure many younger and elderly people in believing that they are not as harsh and as racialist as normally they really are.
I hope tonight there won't be violence or anything like this from the extremes, of course. But it will be a difficult time in Parliament, this for sure.
You know, the thing you have to remember about the National Rally is that its forefather, quite literally, was the National Front, a party founded by the father of Marine Le Pen. He was a Holocaust denier. The party says it's changed. She has sought to distance herself from its xenophobic and racist roots that you've heard that man talking about. That is what it is continuously condemned for. But this is the choice in front of people. People who say that they've changed and that they're willing to give it a chance because the government in power now isn't listening to them. They think President Macron is an elitist, a choice between that. And the people who say they might have changed their facade, but the National Rally is still the National Front, and they haven't really changed their internal dynamic, which is very strongly anti-immigrant and seen by many as xenophobic.
CBC Senior International Correspondent Margaret Evans. Thank you, Margaret.